Hello. Welcome. I have been trying to be better about having more notifications about going live. And I also, so I've been doing this on the Discord, on Instagram and TikTok. The only issue is that sometimes I do forget to take off the notifications because I'm doing it through like the post a thought, leave a note thing. So there we go. I'm working on it. It's a work in progress. My antipathy towards social media is definitely showing itself, but we're working through it. Anyway, it's another day, another stream in fascist America. Welcome to whatever this is, an attempt at providing education, advocacy, and a little common sense in this digital wasteland. I'm Aubri Devashrayee. Hello, Seventh Vixen, and goodbye. I realized this hat, I love this hat. I got it from this online store called Cherry Kitten, but also it's like crooked. It's sewn crooked, the bill's like a little bit out of whack, so we're dealing with that. Struggling through things in many aspects. But here we are, trying shit still. Today, I wanted to continue with episode 5 of the faux podcast by The Onion episode, Did My Police Department Miss Something? While the podcaster actively became the police chief. And that has taken a decade to report back on what's going on. So despite me being like, oh, am I like posting enough? Because, you could always be doing more and shit in the digital media space. At least I'm not like 10 years in between posting and updating and shit. So there's that. That shouldn't be much of a like self-congratulatory moment. But there we go. I've been doing a more regular sleep schedule time zone wise. I'm glad that you have a regular sleep schedule. That's great. Remind me where you're at again. I mean, you don't have to say if you aren't comfortable, but just if you're interested. I'm glad to have caught you, but also your sleep does take more of a priority. So, good for you. I still need to figure that shit out. I often feel like I'm just a baby. I'm like, I don't think I could be someone's parent for many reasons, especially being in Utah and in a couple that many people assume is like hetero. When I'm more like femme presenting, or people assume that I'm more femme. People are like, when are you having kids? Like, you'd look so cute pregnant. I'm like, okay, well, thanks for traumatizing me, because that's like one of my biggest fears is being pregnant and childbirth. So there's that. But also, I'm like, I'm still sleep training myself. I'm still learning how to do like intuitive eating, like learn when I'm full and when I need to eat, and when to like actually have regular sleeping and do like self-soothing, understanding my emotions. I don't know if I am qualified in any way to be doing this for a helpless human being, nor do I want to be. So there we go. I'm very uncomfortable with the country I live in right now, because I was in Barcelona. That's right. Okay. And I was happy with that, but I now live not in Barcelona, but in the rest of the country we are. Oh, I'm sorry. I know that you had some difficult experiences like working in the government in Spain, and also just like dealing with life and like all of the various politics there. But I hope that wherever you are, you can be okay. You can be safe. But yeah, being in the US, it's like, is the world ending? That's like how it feels most of the time. And honestly, that may not be that far off, may not be that dramatic. Uh, Especially as a trans person, where it's like, having a hard time finding a job, healthcare, human dignity. Anyway, I hope that you can be able to be okay. I'm glad that you've been making efforts to take care of yourself, have a consistent sleep schedule. But that, just to be clear, takes priority. I do post VODs to YouTube in case you were wanting to catch up there. Shut up, Automod. I know. That's something else I need to be doing, is like updating like what is allowable and shit. Because there's so many times the Automod like butts in and it's like, that wasn't anything. Like the country of Niger, because they just assume people are being illiterate, which many people are, and they just assume that's a slur, which maybe is fair, but also the country of Niger just unnecessarily getting censored out here. Spain is nice compared to the US. It's just that been born in Catalonian culture, I was like, I'm the most enlightened cosmopolitan in the world, and now I'm just in rural Spain surrounded by rednecks. That is hard. And assuming with, oh, there we go again. Here we go. Allowable. This is allowable. Yeah, dealing with like more conservative politics is really difficult. Like living in Utah, the state that I'm in, it basically is like one of the leaders of like Christian nationalism, like white Zionism, ethno supremacy a lot of the time. So it flies under the radar lately. We've been in the news more, which is good, talking about all of the bullshit going on here that's actually getting highlighted. But yeah, it's scary being in a different place, especially having been used to like in being in a metropolitan, cosmopolitan area where you like have options for things and like people to be interacting with. So I'm sorry you're going through that. I hope you can find some people that you actually like being around out there. You've been busy with work. Sometimes I drift a bit taking a look at Discords, but one has little time for everything. No, it is true. And I also am not always the most consistent at updating the Discord, but, still taking things a little step at a time, I guess. One of my friends that is now a famous YouTuber worked in Niger for a time. Yes, Automod. That's the name of a country. Exactly. Like, they're just getting censored all over the place. I've been meeting a lot of new Americans. Oh, interesting. Lots of left-wingers. That's cool. Most of them think there are no solutions to your problems. Honestly. Yeah, it's hard to see like how we get out of all of this bullshit. But, the left will not rise up against tyranny. I have a hard time believing it, but I guess I don't know enough. I mean, there really is a lot of propaganda that people have to deconstruct. Crazy people with weapons. Well, there is that too. That's not far off from the truth. To be honest, in the US, like with all the proliferation of weapons and like lack of laws regulating all of this stuff, the only laws that really have been instituted throughout the past have been very racially targeted as well. So, like, acknowledging that past and, like, how do we actually have laws that are not oppressing the most marginalized people, where often that can be one of their last points of protection when the government is not doing anything to support our rights, actively stripping away our rights. Like, what else can we do, you know? So it can be a form of protection. I definitely have like been all over the spectrum on that subject throughout my life, having grown up in a conservative area, being like, oh, these are great, and then seeing like all of the harm done, and like people around me who are like really irresponsible and deeply just like not good people. Like having some of these things that's like, I don't think you should have this. But then also coming around to more of the history that's suppressed about like how these things were outlawed specifically for people who were recently freed from slavery, and how these laws have also targeted queer people, and how like seeing the intersection of all of these types of marginalization, the more likely you are to be on the receiving end of violence, and especially like state violence, not to mention just like independent actors, but like police brutality. Yeah, so especially with our police force here being like so incredibly violent, um, that's not to say that they can't be violent in other places in the world, because I think most law enforcement are, especially if you are experiencing marginalization in some form or another. It's very alien. No, and that's okay. I think for me, where I have landed, especially, is like in history, like especially like if people have ancestors where that has been like one of the only ways for them to actually have human dignity is like through revolts, and where laws have like actively targeted them from not having these types of things, that like it makes more sense. But again, that's like not a huge part of history that is taught, and that's for a reason. So, you know, like one of the first times like gun control, like that term was actually brought up, was when Ronald Reagan was the governor of California, and the Black Panthers came to the Capitol because there was some bullshit happening with all of this racial discrimination and legislative targeting of Black people specifically. That it was after they came armed, like many other people who were doing this, but just because they happened to be Black, he was like, oh, we need to like control guns. So like that's something that many right-wingers do not want to acknowledge, that he was like one of the first people to actually coin that term. Even though like many of those practices of like targeting Black people specifically, and indigenous people, indigenous tribes, that there had been laws prohibiting them to actually have any sort of self-defense from being genocided and enslaved. So yeah, I think it's much more nuanced than what I originally gave credence to. Hunters and stuff. I've not had problems to use weapons for hunting. He was like, well, you need a license, so I cannot even let... Yeah, and it's so wild as well, like how different some of these laws can be. Like even in like different states in the US. Like honestly, whatever state you are in, it can feel like you're in different countries with how different the laws can be, how different the uh how different like the landscape is, the politics. It's really wild. Less than 100 years ago. Oh, yep, in the Civil War. Yeah, exactly. And so like see, it's like there's so much nuance that is going into that as well. Of like there's a lot of trauma that people have around these types of things, and like important to recognize the amount of harm that can be caused. Like, we need to be addressing it in a nuanced way, I think, because trying to have like these prescriptive solutions that are not like actively perpetuating a lot of the same type of harm that's been done in the past, it's really difficult to get out of that type of structure and the systems that are inherently oppressive. So, yeah, I mean, it's good to be talking about, especially like hearing from people all along the political spectrum, um, and like understanding like the rationale, I think is really good to take into consideration. But yeah, yeah, that's interesting to hear about. And I think, like I was saying before, it's important to acknowledge all of those aspects. My mother, for example, around 80, is very fascist. Yeah, I mean, the the elderly tend to be more fascist, sadly. Not all of them, but she thinks the dictator was good, but I don't know. Old people. Sadly, right wing parties keep appearing, sometimes appealing young people. Yeah, especially with like the age old tactics that are used of like, oh, if things are bad, it's not like these billionaires and political interests that are pitting us against each other to hide the fact that they're stealing from us and exploiting us, but that it's like these groups of people that they're pointing to, of like, oh, it's immigrants, oh, it's queer people, oh, it's women, like just so many different ways that they try to get us fighting one another than realizing that like we do have a lot more in common because of the circumstances that are imposed on us, but they want us to not be talking about it. It's the American export. Yeah, US exports 30 years ago were movies. Yeah, and culture, exactly. And some politics with a lot of the stuff that happens with like the American empire, the US empire, and exporting some of that shit, and even how like American exceptionalism, that's not something that just Americans believe in. Sadly, the propaganda is heavy. Now it's Trumpism, but yes, especially when like there is the rise of all of this fascism in the heart of empire, it just is allowing this permission structure for it to rise in other places in the world where people are like, "Oh, we can do this now? Okay." It's like, "No. How about no?" Hello, Aliana. Welcome. Oh, I meant to tell you, I neglected to save your signal number, but if you want to like send it in a whisper, whatever that is, I've never really done that before, but I didn't want you to think that I forgot. Spanish news are usually always lawfare about the right making bullshit claims that some left politicians are corrupt, and years later it results they're innocent. Ugh. Yeah, like the projection, it's like there's just the same tactics that are used over and over again. That it's like you really aren't creative enough to come up with like a new playbook, but they're like, it worked in the past. Like, okay. Big sister said she'd buy me a collar for my up and coming birthday or Christmas. That's fun. Very cute. If you have like any like ideas of what you're wanting it to look like I'm very interested in hearing about this, or if you're part of the Discord, like sending any sort of pictures. Not that we don't have corrupt leftists, yeah, but there is lawfare, how it was called, all barking no bite. Yeah, it's like, no political ideology is exempt from corruption. And thinking that is just prepping people to be propagandized and have the wool pulled over their eyes for corruption. Don't allow whispers. Oh, I'll update that. Buy a chain one. Cute. I love that. I mean, especially if she knows your taste, then like you're in good hands. Good pause. Well, I guess not if she isn't into pet play either. I can true talk here. I do hope Trump is by some weirdo. No, I mean, like, it's not that he doesn't, like, the world wouldn't be a better place without him in it. Like, I think everyone can probably agree with that, but also, like, he needs to suffer. He needs to, like, we need to have some sort of sense of justice with everything that's going on. Of, like, he has avoided accountability and consequences for his actions his entire life. So, like, we need something to happen that's him getting off too easy, you know? She said it's a really pretty expensive one, not a cheap one. Ooh, I love that. That collar I wear sometimes. Oh, it's actually here. I was wearing it yesterday on stream. This is one that my partner made from scratch. That like we like went to like the hardware store, like got some stuff, and I was like, I like this, and I chose these things. So that was really fun to do. And take you on a walk. Look, I also had this that I was wearing yesterday. This is very timely. I love that. That's so fun. As a very autistic person, I think people need to be accountable. Yeah. I don't know if I'm autistic. I wouldn't be surprised though. But yeah, that is like a through line with many people who are on the spectrum is like a very deep sense of injustice in the world and wanting justice. Like that really is important. Yeah, that's right. I remember you saying that your uncles were Maoist. No, you're an outsider. I mean, if you're feeling that way, this is a good place. This is a good place to feel like if the world is not accepting of you, there's a meeting of minds that can happen here. I mean, especially as like we're talking about all of these political movements and stuff, it's like what capitalism does, what especially fascism does, but like even liberalism in general is it like makes people like it perpetuates a lot of these feelings of loneliness, like people talking about like the male loneliness epidemic. But it's not a male loneliness epidemic, it's patriarchy. It just is. We're in late stage capitalism where patriarchy is like on steroids, and they're like, oh, we hate women, but we want them. We want companionship, but they're not equal. And we want a wife, but then we want them to be virgins. And then we want them to be sexual, but then we don't want them to be. That's like, of course you're lonely. Can you imagine what that is doing to like your prospective dating partners and like the people around you? But like just shows how like oppressive systems hurt everyone. Like patriarchy hurts men. So, oh, thank you. Yeah, it is very well made. He did a really great job with it. I'm very pleased, and I wear it all the time. What's patriarchy mean? That is a great conversation, or that a great question, and a great conversation too. A whole conversation for sure. Yes, exactly. Patriarchy is essentially this idea that like men and maleness are inherently dominant and deserve to be in positions of dominance where they can control things. So like it's not just an idea that people have. Patriarchy is institutionalized in many ways, like just the concept of um the phenomenon of it being common practice. And I mean, it depends on where you are, like we were talking about, like in more conservative areas or like more like progressive areas of like marrying, like being in like a hetero relationship and like taking a man's name, of like that being common practice, but that also extending to like these larger forms of like male supremacy in making it so that women, people with uteruses, don't have the ability to have autonomy over their bodies, where like somehow like male legislators have more power of telling people like what they can do with their bodies than medical professionals, let alone what people with uteruses can like decide for their own lives. Also like pay gaps and opportunities for employment, not having access to birth control methods, parental leave, which like parental leave like affects everyone, like, which is also why it's important to talk about like patriarchy, like this idea of like male dominance is best. Um, that is like this type of dominance that people can't possibly consent to because we aren't born into the world. And if you have a uterus being like, hey, do you want to be dominated by men? Do you like agree to these things? And it's like, you don't. Or like being treated differently for presenting as femme, like that's a product of patriarchy. It's queer phobia, but also how like this idea of strict gender roles. It's a very colonial type of dominance where like in many indigenous societies there is this general acceptance of gender expansiveness, and how like matriarchy of like women actually having more control over like certain aspects of society, or like when like men would marry into a family, they would go and live with like the wife's family, and then like there would be like a grandmother or like an auntie of some sort that would have more of like a leadership role. So it's like these aspects of imposed dominance in society that create these hierarchies of human dignity like we can't possibly consent to when we're born into this shitty world. It often is just a product of years and years of, you know, like colonization and exploitation. So, yeah, that's a whole thing. But we can get into more of that history and such. We do talk about like decolonizing gender sometimes, and we can talk more about like how patriarchy is institutionalized, how it's not just like an idea or like a few ideas that people hold. Even like the language that we use of saying like, oh, you're a pussy, meaning like inherently like anyone with a uterus, vagina, vulva, that like that's weakness, instead of like recognizing like, oh, these things are actually extremely resilient and tough. And you know what isn't? Testes. They're actually extremely sensitive, you know? So go figure. Pay gaps are institutionalized. Yes, exactly. So, like, that's an example of patriarchy that is institutionalized, or even how, like, women not having the right to vote, like, how many conservative people are wanting to bring this back. They don't want, they want women to stay home and be baby factories and not have, like, any sort of sense of autonomy or, like, selfhood, self determination in society because they want control. But then they also are very lonely because they're like, oh, like I don't have someone that's like equal to me. Like, okay, that's a delusion that you're believing in. But that's why a lot of these like very uh conservative people and like fascist people with strict ideas about gender, why they can sound so gay sometimes. Because they're like, oh, men, I love men. That's like, okay, then like go fuck one. Like go kiss a man. We don't care, but like don't demonize people for doing it. You know what I mean? Yeah, women are paid less for the same work, how women are not taken as seriously, like lack of research with people with uteruses in their bodies, of like any sort of medical studies. That like it's only been very recently where people started studying like menstrual fluid, like the qualities of menstrual fluid, and that it has like extremely uh salient healing properties. And it's like, yeah, because you guess what happens every month for people who menstruate? It's like this is uh like a kind of trauma that happens to the body, and then there's all of this healing that has to happen. So just like more examples of this, or like how it's like acceptable to be like catcalling like women in the streets. If I had mental space to worry about myself beyond just my work, I'll worry about the current society being bipolar about if me being a man is good or bad, being a single father, because violence from my female partner. Yeah, and that's like not to say like being in patriarchy that like women can't also be like acting in ways that are harmful. And often a sign of patriarchy is that um when there are female partners or abusers that are not taken seriously, because there's this idea of gender that's like, oh, women are weak, women are like not bad, or they're not violent. Like we associate that with masculinity, which is like an absurd thing to do. And then it's this idea that like women can't cause harm, that then is a part of patriarchy that hurts men and women, because then they are like not held accountable for their actions either. I'm sorry you went through that. When I tried to talk unknown possible dates about that, was not well received. Like that can't happen. Yeah, exactly. Or this idea of thinking that like someone the other day on a stream was saying like they had a person who was a AMAB, assigned male at birth, and identifies as male, was like, I had a female stalker and police would not take me seriously. And they would just like laugh at me and think that I was weak. And it's like, that's a sign of patriarchy. It's like, if we actually viewed women, like gender expansive people, as being equal, then we actually understand that like human beings can cause immense harm to one another, and that it doesn't necessarily have to like do with gender because they're born a certain way, but rather because of these conditions that are imposed on people, or like this idea of like masculinity or femininity, where femininity is viewed as weakness and being like soft and subservient and submissive inherently, and like masculinity, in order for people to feel more male, a lot of the time there's like so much conditioning to be like, oh, you have to be like aggressive and violent. And like that also hurts men. Like young boys growing up who are like very sensitive and like emotional, like how that is just like being like, oh, you're a sissy, like language like that of saying like, oh, it's bad to have feelings. That doesn't mean you are even being feminine. That just means you're being a human being. But we just have these weird ideas of what it means to be a certain gender, which is a type of dominance, where these larger forces that our society is built off of, and like political forces especially, are monetarily benefiting from, that they want this kind of oppression because they are able to benefit from these hierarchies. Yeah, and being a single father, of understanding how like there are situations that like you may be cut off from more access to programs that can be helpful, and it's like that shouldn't have to be a thing. It's like if you're a single parent in general, that is difficult. That doesn't mean that like you may have more employment opportunities or opportunities to have higher pay, but that's not a guarantee. You know, it's like all of these ideas about gender hurt everyone. And it doesn't help living in, yeah, exactly, when you're in a more conservative place where there tends to be more like strict ideas about gender. I'll get work in order. Society. I mean, we just have to do what we can. You know, like we have to do what we can to survive. Like recently, like just yesterday, like I like found out, I'm like, oh, I became an affiliate with Twitch. And like that's very exciting because like I was pushed out of my job for being like too outspoken and queer and like being multiracial and all this stuff. Um, Especially with like this very fascist agenda of saying that like we can't release reports on people who come from marginalized communities. So like data suppression and stuff, and understanding like, oh, I've been working odd jobs and needing an income. It's harder for me to get a job being like having they them pronouns on a resume, having a last name like Devashrayee, that's Sanskrit, that, especially in Utah. People are like, what the fuck is that? I don't want anything that's like viewed as foreign, which is just like not Eurocentric. And also having a female first name, which is Aubri. That's a sign of patriarchy, queerphobia that's like systematized with these ideas about gender and like xenophobia, racism that goes in there. And understanding how I'm like, okay, being an affiliate means that like there are ads that are going to be shown. And like there isn't a way around that. Like if you accept to become an affiliate, but that's one of like the few ways you can get paid outside of subscriptions alone, and understanding like I still have to survive somehow and like make money. I am very Marxist in leaning and don't believe in like supporting corporations and understand the harm of like corporate greed. So there's like we're constantly having to make sacrifices in a world where we have limited choices and we're oppressed, which is what oppression means, is having limited choices. And that just goes to show how like this is the intention that they want for us, is to have limited choices, because that means that the people who are on top, the 1%, the ruling class, that they are able to control us more easily. Especially it's like if you are not aligned with their idea of who they want to be like a person in society, like a queer person, like a single parent, being like femme presenting in any way, that it's like you have even more barriers. And so you have to constantly be making compromises just to live as a human being. My cousin's a woman hating Andrew Tate, worshiping brown people, hating fascist incel. Ugh. It really is so frustrating because you can see how it hurts them as well. Like they're deeply unhappy, and it just makes them even more unhappy. It makes them unhappier. And that's like another example of like patriarchy hurting them and these ideas about gender. That's like maybe if you weren't as fascist, if you actually like respected women and like were willing to like see them as equals and listen to them, you might not be like as angry all the time. I'm a girly and I'm aggressive and violent with my friends. Last time I went out with a girlfriend, she kicked me in the crotch after she gave me 5 grams of shrooms. Because I tried sweet. No. Do they like do they consent to this kind of aggression? That's the real thing. Because if not, then there you may have to limit some of that. But if they like that, if they do want that kind of aggression, like go for it. There was an express trial. Her lawyer was, if she weighs 50 kilograms. Yes, exactly. Of like, oh, you're small. Like, they're smaller in stature. They can't cause any problems. And it's like, I mean, stature can be used as a way to intimidate, especially like I'm like 5'3", which I'm trying to think of that in like meters to translate. I'm kind of short and like, don't have like, so I'm like smaller in stature, and like people can use their like physical build to try to intimidate me a lot, or like you are more unsafe in a lot of situations, but that doesn't mean that like you can't cause harm still. That's just like another form of like patriarchal harm that you're experiencing. I'm sorry you experienced that. Wonder about the lawyers that have to defend indefensible things. Exactly. Like, how do they sleep at night? They get paid a shit ton of money. And also, if they have a hard time sleeping, they have like a lot of access to pills to help them do that. And also, you can see how, like, sometimes this comes out in other ways of, like, their unhappiness. Like, rather than having it be, like, a moment for self reflection and be like, oh, I'm causing all of this harm, they will, like, take it out on other people or be like, oh, the harm is actually this. Like, it's my wife or something like that. Instead of being, or like substance use or abuse, where it's like, I mean, I use plenty of substances, so like, there's not anything inherently wrong with that, but just like this larger expression of people like not wanting to confront the harm that they're perpetuating. Speaking about not wanting to confront the harm they're perpetuating, your cousin being deeply unhappy. Such an incel that his last ex flew to the Philippines to escape him. Damn. Yeah, it really is sad to see, especially like if you've seen the change over time, like how it just erodes their sense of self. 136 centimeters, I think. You're only 4 rulers tall. I'm pretty short. I'm too autistic to understand people working for anything they just don't love. Yeah, I mean, or like what they believe in, but also like as we're talking about these like systems of oppression, of like when like having opportunity is a privilege, of like being able to have choice, like access to be like the education that you want, to pursue the career that you want, being willing to be viewed as like an eligible candidate for something. Um, where it's like if you aren't able to find a job, like for my situation of like being forced to like work certain kinds of jobs, like odd jobs that I will not talk about here, that like I may not be doing otherwise, like that is the intended goal of what these oppressive systems do, is that they are like not wanting someone like me to be like pursuing something that I enjoy in a position with that is well paid and is like being noticed for some reason or another, that it's like that is what like Bell Hooks, she is a black anti-capitalist feminist who like was calling out cis heteropatriarchy and defines oppression as the absence of choices, where it's like you can see the people who have the least amount of choices are people who are, whether it is institutionalized or no, like people who are enslaved, where it's like you do not have autonomy whatsoever. And how from there, it's like once you actually are allowed to have choices like over your own body, your own selfhood, what you're wanting to do for your future, where you're living, how you're living, what you're eating, if you drink clean water, that it's like these are all luxuries that are deeply tied to class and race and gender, disability, ability, queerness. So there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah, being cisgender as well. Yeah. It's it's heavy stuff, but also good to be talking about. Good discussion, y'all. This is why I enjoy streaming, is being able to talk to people about these things, because it can make us feel like we're crazy sometimes, that we're like losing our minds trying to make sense of this world that doesn't actually make sense, where there aren't good answers to things, where we want to be able to do what we want to do and have other people have that kind of freedom. And it's like, why isn't it that easy? Because there are just like so many people profiting and literally invested in making it so people don't have that kind of freedom. I can understand people that fight for social moral systems that benefit them. It's the lowest model of morality, but it's easy to understand cultural self profit. But I don't know, just for money, I guess I don't understand money. No, it's true. I mean, I agree. Like, money is like really dumb. Like, it's not interesting. But since we are living, especially in like global capitalism, where essentially like money means the most, it's like the highest good, even though there's no such thing. Like, you can't assign morality with money. It just is like mind boggling because it's like a weird thing to be idolizing so much. I would still work on things I agree with. I just can't really understand people that just do whatever for money. Yeah, I mean, especially for people who have money already, where you are not forced into work that you don't want to be doing because, like, you don't have any other options available to you. Where, like, sometimes, like, um, having like principles that you can like act on regularly, like that can be a luxury with class. And how like it doesn't make sense where like if people already have money, why they're like so obsessed with like getting even more money and like the choices that they make with it just for money. But like understanding that there are people who are like forced into kinds of work that they don't want to do all the time because they don't have any other options. Yeah. When people already have money, it's about power. Exactly. And that's when we really just understand that like all of these like things that are really upsetting about living in, we all live in a society. It's like living in all of these systems that are oppressive and exploitative, is that it's like that's what it comes down to, is money and power. And that's really boring. Like, you would think that humans would be more interesting than that, but a lot of the time it isn't. Which is why it's like easy to be able to tell like what people's intentions are, um, especially when it comes to politics and like so-called leaders, where it's like, oh, why are they making a particular decision? Most of the time, it's not because they have some sort of like moral principle that they're acting off of. It's because they want money and power, and they're pursuing the avenue that is getting them that. So I wish people were more interesting than that, but like that's why it's like cool to see when people actually have principles and a backbone when they are afforded these things, to be able to like actually see that like human beings, when they're given the chance and like the notice, like can actually do like very noble, heroic, cool, artistic, impressive shit. But the people who are at the top really only care about money and power. Otherwise, we would have like way cooler art that got noticed. Like, I don't know if you all know the streamer Ari at Home. He's in New York City. I love New York City for many reasons, but he's a musician, and he goes around just every day and streams, and he finds people who are musicians. People come up to him like they're singers, or like they play an instrument of some sort, or they're rappers, and they just make music on the spot. And it's like some of the like coolest music I've ever heard, and it can't even be replicated. So if you don't follow him, I recommend following him. He's really great. Or following him on like social media as well, where he like posts a lot of clips of things where it's like we have so much immense talent and creativity and heart and like passion and principle in the working class that just doesn't get noticed because they don't want it to be the people who are in charge, which are these capitalist warmongers who view us as dollar signs and cannon fodder. rather than human beings. Money is usually a red flag. Here in this little rural town, the guy that drove the fanciest car opened a bar called The Graveyard. A year later, domestic violence. The wife won the bar. All the other rich guys around always talking about violence with neighbors. Yeah, especially like if that is all people care about, if it's not out of like necessity, like where when you have very little money, like as a class thing, and like all these other forms of oppression we've been talking about that limit people's choices and opportunities, that like if people have stability, they already have money, and that's like all they care about, it's like, that's so boring. And also, they don't have really a sense of morality because they're just doing whatever will get the money. When I moved to this house, some girl from Valencia moving some furniture to us, I made her a coffee and had a little talk. Seeing me as a single father, she told me, if you want to meet a woman, tell her you don't have anything. No flat, no job, no money. What? Well, I guess if it's saying like love you for you. But yeah, I mean, that is also an aspect of being in patriarchy, is this aspect of women feeling like they have to find someone who's like a provider that can care for them, or like wanting to find partners who have money when there are like limited opportunities for women, that it's like maybe that phenomenon wouldn't be as present if people had more equal opportunities. But yeah, it's good to be talking about. Shall we get into some of the things that I've planned for today? I love this conversation, and I'd love to continue it throughout the stream today. This is the second episode, or the second part of episode 5, this fake podcast by The Onion. They're a satire publication. They do some really funny stuff. Did my police department miss something? The podcaster actively became the police chief and part of the problem as he got involved in solving this case. And then once he became police chief, like had no interest in it. So we're catching up 10 years later. And I love that detail. It's all in the details with them. Hello, Tan. Welcome. How are you doing? Okay, I do need to step out for just a sec. I'll be right back, but I'm going to play this.
Part 2 of episode 5, I want to talk to you about another podcast from OPR. Two guys eating bagels so close to the mic. If you love off-the-cuff body banter between two friends, then you'll love the comedy of Two Guys Eating Bagels So Close to the Mic, which allows listeners to laugh, learn, and get a big ol' listen to every doughy chew. Check out Two Guys Eating Bagels So Close to the Mic on your podcast app today. Okay, let's get right to the show. In Nebraska, tornadoes are part of the fabric of life. The state averages around 50 of the suckers every year, and Bluff Springs has seen its fair share of bad ones. Last year, I saw a twister rip a whole big barn to shreds. It was sick. But lately, I've realized that an unsolved murder is a lot like a tornado. It can tear a town apart. So you can imagine how I felt when I got a search warrant and made my way towards W.O. Calloway's estate to finally solve this thing, with the purpose and determination of a Nebraskan tornado, to finally stop the tornado that was this unsolved murder. As I sat in the back of our landmine-resistant armored tank, I couldn't help but feel proud of what I was about to accomplish. After all these years, all of the botched leads and dead ends...
Pass me that M14.
I was finally going to completely fix these people's lives. I tried not to get emotional as I strapped on my government-issued ballistic protection and communicated with the SWAT commander.
Arm the Bearcat turret with 50 caliber Browning. We don't know what we're walking into here.
T-minus 90 seconds. The drone is in position.
You know, before I started this job, the Bluff Springs Police Department didn't have a single Bearcat. That's a ballistic engineered armored response counterattack truck. But now we have 4. Calloway's gate, despite its size, was no match for our wheels. We were in. In one short, heavily armed raid, this would all be over, and Haley's family could finally have peace. I turned on my night vision goggles, put my dog Skiff on a leash, and we stormed the place.
Go, go, go!
My finger was on the trigger in case I needed to be a hero and take the shot myself. But then, I saw him.
Mr. Calloway?
That's my name.
Is that him?
Hold your fire! Hold your fire!
He was sitting in a childlike fort made out of gold bricks, trying to see how many $100 bills he could fit in his mouth. The men, the guns, none of it fazed him. The only moment he got up from his velvet pillow was to chase the red circles from our lasers along the walls of the dimly lit study.
That.
I knew it right away. This wouldn't end in a shooting.
I'm back. I don't know what I missed with this. If you all want to catch me up, I'd appreciate it, but don't feel pressured to. Riding the high from making another person's day. What happened? What happened? Besides, like, helping to make my day yesterday with just talking over things. Do tell.
Out? This man wasn't a threat to anyone. As he laid down on a massage table and started wheeling himself around with his hands on the ground, I dismissed the SWAT team.
All right, guys, you can get out of here. I can handle it.
And I sat down one-on-one with Calloway. His team of nurses helped me understand
Calloway.
him in between the moments when they fed him pills and he chewed them all up.
See, this is his family tree here.
Oh my God, he is fifth in line to the King of the Netherlands.
Well, his mother there.
Is also
Generational
his
wealth.
cousin.
Listen, I don't know what you could possibly want with Mr. Calloway, Chief. He's just a simple old man finishing up his last days alone.
He is a suspect in the murder of Haley Price.
Alone. Yeah, as we're talking about powerful old men evading justice. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how with it you are. You need to actually face consequences if you've done bad shit. I'm gonna be eating some pistachios in the background. I fucking love pistachios.
Absolutely not. Even if he was capable of something like that.
I am not.
Haley was murdered at night, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Sometime around midnight.
I sleep up in the whirly birds.
Yes, I'm telling him that. You see, every night, for as long as I've known him, W.O. sleeps in a helicopter circling the city. He likes the way the vibrations feel. It is the only way he can fall asleep. 7 p.m. to 9 a.m. every night.
I sleep up in the whirly birds.
Yes, you do.
By the way, I didn't know this.
What?
I thought the loud whirring noises above the town every night were just government-issued planes releasing some type of sterilization mist to keep the population at bay.
Well, Okay.
That's so
suppose you have any
ominous.
Flight records? Of course.
Also, wouldn't put it past the government to be doing such a thing.
The flight records proved it. W.O. Calloway was in a helicopter above Bluff Springs for the entire night of Haley's murder. And in case that wasn't enough proof, they were also able to produce a security camera video from within the helicopter that showed Mr. Calloway sleeping that very night. It was 13 hours long, and I watched every minute of it.
Okay, there he is. Okay. Still sleeping. All right.
I can fast forward if you...
No. Shh. Well, okay then.
So I was wrong. This man couldn't have murdered Haley. But that didn't answer all of my questions.
Did you know that Mr. Calloway left a note in Haley Price?
Feeding pets raw food. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's so good for them. Put on my sexy nitrile gloves. Yes. Have some dinner. Yeah, do what you need to do. This is feeding time for many of us right now.
Mrs. Locker, how do you explain this?
This is certainly very strange.
And then the old man cleared his throat.
I never had a best friend. Then Haley comes and she walks my dogs. I thought, this is my best friend.
That's so sad and so stupid.
Then she leaves to a new job and a new best friend, and I think, it's goodbye for good. I'll never have a best friend. Who are you? Do you want to be my best friend?
I left immediately. I couldn't believe I had failed so miserably. Not only had I let the town down,
I
I let my
left
listeners down.
immediately.
The man I'd spent a decade and over $42
So you believe him? So you just believe him then? Ugh.
million of Pentagon grants chasing down was not a murderer. The richest man in Bluff Springs was also the dumbest. The frustration mounting, I took one of the Bearcats for a joyride to blow off some steam. My best lead was a bust. Did I fail? Would I ever find justice for Haley?
That is
Would I
so
ever
wild.
finish what I'm sure could one day become the most game-changing serialized podcast of the year? There's a type of fish that's native to the shallow waters of the Mediterranean Sea. It's called a spotted weaver. Brown and yellow on its head and back, 3 poisonous spines. It feeds on smaller fish and crustaceans. And as I'm recording this episode, I can't help but think that the best way to pull me out of this funk is to use a spotted weaver as a metaphor for an unsolved murder. They're
Oh,
both
no.
long and poisonous and icky. And like an unsolved murder, they have dark spots.
Icky. I love that word, icky. Oh, that's funny. Also, another one of these dumb metaphors that they do.
All over them. Right now, I'm in the darkest spot of them all. I knew what I had to do. I had to go back to New York where I could clear my head and talk to the only person who could help me now, Ethel. I hadn't been back to the Big Apple in almost 10 years, but
not
Onion
his
Public Radio was
AI,
still paying
Ethel.
me $135,000 a year, so I owed them a visit anyway. And I'd heard that David Chang opened a couple new Momofuku since I left. So I packed my things and I left Bluff Springs, a place I had grown to love. While none of the residents of Bluff Springs are quite as smart as me, they're all intelligent, thoughtful people with hopes and dreams. Some of them
you're
became
the
my best
police
friends,
chief.
one of them became my
Just
wife, and they
upping
all
and
became the
leaving?
taxpayers responsible for my robust police chief salary. I loved these people. It was time for me to finally be the hero I promised them I would be all those years ago. Next time on A Very Fatal Murder.
Now batting, your right fielder, Aaron Judge.
Forget about
Welcome back, David.
Oh my god, this changes everything. A Very Fatal Murder is made possible by the Budweiser Clydesdales and Girl Scouts of the Swamp. Special thanks to Lockheed Martin for providing our recording equipment.
No! Just skipping over that last part. Lockheed Martin, they're weapons manufacturers. Jesus Christ. Girl Scouts from the swamp.
Now that you've enjoyed this free podcast episode, it's time to put an end to your pathetic freeloading and subscribe to The Onion today. You'll receive 12 monthly issues of our
Call
award-winning
us out.
newspaper delivered straight to your mailbox. Visit membership.theonion.com now to learn more.
Okay. It's funny. It just continues to be funny. Love that. I feel like it's getting even better over time, too. Okay. So, I was gonna read the comments. It absolutely had to be Ethel. Ethel was tasked with finding the perfect murder, but one didn't exist, so Ethel made one. Honestly, that might be true. AI must please the user, and he is pleased. Somehow we're totally skimming the connection between Calloway and Epstein. Oh my god. Yeah, if this was real life, there definitely would be. I'm beginning to believe that it was either David himself, or might actually have been one of those cases of natural death, gunshot stabbing, strangling, drownings you hear about from time to time. Natural. Oh my god. Wait, Calloway actually didn't kill anyone? Can't you arrest him for being a gross non-killer or something, Dave? Yeah, just taking his word for it. I don't sleep during that time. Or I sleep during that time. That couldn't have been me. Like, okay. You're absolved then. Great alibi that no one can confirm. Wow. Also, the fact, like, the audio of him going back to New York, just like this, like the stereotypical New York City sounds of, "Hey, I'm walking here." And what was the other one? There was something else too. Okay, so let's briefly go over some local news that's happening, that has happened. What's this? 3 days ago. Whoops. Okay. Then we will go over strike choke points. I've been wanting to go over this for a while. And then we'll get into our singing lesson, focused primarily on breathing once again, but also talking about the anatomy of lungs and how that will also be related to the diaphragm, since lungs are able to even operate because of the diaphragm. So we'll go over that, go over some more breathing exercises, and then finish this damn book, The Scarlet Pimpernel, that is just aristocratic propaganda that I would love to get over with, because after we'll be reading the Communist Manifesto. So, here we go. This came out a few days ago. Hundreds of protesters gathered Saturday at the Utah Capitol building to protest plans to build a massive data center. So, yeah, this happened last Saturday with a lot of organizing bodies putting this together. And people are very upset, for good reason, with the existence of this data center and how, or I guess it hasn't existed yet, but there really are no signs of it being taken seriously. The concerns of the public, of experts that are saying it's going to be devastating to ecosystems, human life, and the larger well-being of the state. So let's see what this has in store for us.
I'll keep on organizing. I've always organized. But just let us know. But more importantly, what I want...
What is happening? Is it just audio? This is weird.
Organize, and I'll keep on organizing. I've always organized. But just let us know. But more importantly, what I want to get out here, I can't tell you how to vote, but please vote, because there are many people in my district, if they had the privilege to vote,
here we go.
They would. And I can tell you, we have to have hope again, because if we don't have hope, then we've lost. And that's why we're here today, because we have hope, because of people like Shannon, who have stepped up and said no more. Now, I'm going to turn my time over to my colleague, Representative Arthur, who I want to remind you again is a public education teacher. And he's going to lead us in a chant.
Thank you. Hey, everybody, I'm just going to keep this brief. As a school teacher, I can't help when I notice young people in the crowd. I see Carol and her baby over here. I see young people on the steps, in the crowd. You all probably couldn't see Shannon's button over here.
Speed this
but her
up.
button says, the only thing more powerful than hate is love. I had somebody ask me, why are you going to this rally? Is it because you hate data centers so much? And I was like, they're not my favorite. But I am not going anywhere because of something I hate. I'm showing up just like all of you because I'm driven by love. So right now, before we turn it over to the next speaker, I'd like to lead you a little chant. It's very simple. It goes like this. For our children, air, water, and land, we keep on fighting and take a stand. You ready? I go, then you go. You're like, oh, it's Saturday. Why am I in school? No. It's all good. For our children, air, water, and land. For our children, air, water, and land. We'll keep on fighting and take a stand. We'll keep on fighting and take a stand. One more time. For our children, air, water, and land. For our children, air, water, and land. We'll keep on fighting and take a stand.
We'll keep on fighting and take a stand.
Love you all so much. Thank you.
That's okay. Give it up for Angela and John.
What is this? Good question. Okay. I probably could have prepped this more. This is a protest that happened last Saturday at the Utah Capitol in Salt Lake City. And this is to protest specifically the data center that is being built in Box Elder County that Kevin O'Leary, who was on Shark Tank, he's not even technically a billionaire, so we're not going to call him a billionaire. He's just this Shark Tank idiot who is selfish and trying to build this data center in a place that has been in a drought. Utah does not have the water or resources to fund something like this, to actively have these precious resources be used in this way. It is going to use up tons of energy, water, and also just make it so that people are losing jobs right and left because of AI. They're trying to claim it's a national security project, which is how they've been able to do a workaround with normal oversight that would be happening with some of these types of projects. They would need environmental impact reports. They would need to abide by zoning laws. But because it is categorized as a national security project, which also is a red flag for people to understand that this is about surveillance, this is about military use as well, and for making it so that we have even less autonomy, that they are able to get away with all this bullshit and not have the normal checks and balances, what little there actually are, to get something like this built. So people are very upset. And to be clear, this isn't the first data center that has been built in Utah, that is being built in Utah. It is definitely the largest. It is set to take up 40,000 acres of land. And it also is projected to take about 16 to 17 gigawatts of power. And the whole state of Utah uses 4 gigawatts of power on average each year. So it's more than 4 times the amount of power. And that's just for this one data center. So it's highlighting a lot of the political rot, the incestuous corruption that happens with these elected representatives who get into office from the first place because of this corporate money, the military industrial complex, these lobbyists and corporations that are also invested literally in these projects, and they are monetarily benefiting from it. So that's a little bit of the background.
It's so true what Angela is saying. These issues have been around
How
for a
did
long
the
time,
feeding
and they
go?
are coming into public view. But the issues of war, the issues of resource extraction, the issues of what kind of economies do we want to build, what kind of things do we want Utah to be known for? Is it?
Yeah, I'm glad she's talking about resource extraction, but also how it is just exploitative with human beings and empowering the ruling class to continue the surveillance state and absorb wages and salaries. Yeah, of course. How or what happened with you making someone's day? I'm very curious. I don't know what I got myself into. Wait, what do you mean? Oh, I fed them tripe. Are they loving it or no?
Number one premier defense economy in the world?
It stinks so bad. I have never smelled tripe, but that's what I hear about it. I'm sure they probably appreciate it. I mean, you'll have to let me know what they think.
So that they can continue to benefit from the extraction of people's power.
The pictures that you sent in the Discord are so cute. They absolutely love it. Aww.
Clean air and water is our right. Clean air and water is our right. For it, we will fight, fight, fight. For it, we will fight, fight, fight. Clean air and water is our right. Clean air and water is our right. For it,
It's got little fat, so I put in quail eggs. They're eating so well with you. They're some very lucky kitties to have you.
you guys are so great. It's so hot out here.
Herring oil.
We have water on
Ooh.
either side of the stairs. We have water in our medical tent that is on
They're
our
eating
east
so
side.
well.
And we have some water at the PSL table, which is on our west side. Please, please, please take care of yourself and get some water if you need it. Next. Woo! So fair! Next up,
Spirulina. Oh yeah. I still need to try that with our cats.
Patrick is a water and climate scientist at Utah State University and recognized as the University Researcher of the Year in 2018. Today, he speaks not for the university, but from his own conscience, experience, and concern. And honestly, his education level, because he could probably give us a few things, right? He served 5 years as vice chair of Logan City Renewable Energy and Sustainability Advisory Board. And then in 2025, he co-founded a community organizing group, Our Community Cache Valley.
What? That's it? What a weird video. That was all over the place. KUTV, do better. It's probably like some boomers that aren't giving their jobs up. And they're just like, I'll do this. I made a client's day by bringing up memories of his youth. Oh, Indigenous fella. I love that. What were some of the memories? I mean, not to share his business or anything, but if there's something that you'd like to share. Asked him if it would be appropriate to say Tansy. Told me the right way, and we had a good laugh. Oh, how do you say it? Is it Tansy? Tansy? And I'm sure he appreciated that so much. Of like, oh, you actually recognize Tansy? I'm glad you could do that, Tan. I'm sure that meant so much to him.
A maxim from the governor for an essential
That's really cool. And also just goes to show how, like, just even taking the time to consider, like, people's various cultures and, like, what is meaningful to them, like, how much of an impact that can have. And honestly says a lot about you that, like, you were thinking about that and were being considerate, and that you're able to have that shared moment is really cool. Good for you. Okay, so this next video that I wanted to show, this was an announcement of the Utah governor, Governor Cox. Governor Caillou Cox is what I call him, or Governor Flaccid Cox, if you will, because he's spineless. And he said that Utah's in a state of emergency because over 60% of the state enters extreme drought conditions. It's like, we've been in a drought, bitch. We were telling you this. And now he's like, we need to conserve water, while also trying to say we need data centers, and also somehow that, like, these data centers are going to make water. I'm like, okay, so you just have, like, clouds in there? What the fuck? That's not real. You're just lying, and you think that everyone is stupid because they've been able to get away with all of this bullshit and corporate greed for so long that they aren't even, like, getting clever with their lies. It just is really insulting our intelligence.
resource.
We can't control the weather, but we can control the tap.
He issued a state.
We can control people who are trying to build shit that are going to use up tons of water, Spencer. Ugh, he's so annoying.
Wide drought emergency and what he calls a record-breaking challenge. What about the practical effect of your executive order? What does it do? And do you foresee going further this summer should the drought worsen?
Well, so the practical effect is twofold.
Cox.
Also, how he's wearing a Carhartt vest. It's so interesting to me that Carhartt has now become like a sign of class. I think this has been directly co-opted by the ruling class, the capitalists, not only just because they want to profit off of anything, but Carhartt started out as like being a brand for workers, like people who are in instruction, who are in the trades, because they make durable, very good quality clothes that are very protective when people are engaging in various types of work. I think it was also a way to have them co-opt this visibility of the working class and actually like stymie some of its momentum with people actually liking their clothes. Tonsi Nitotem. What up, my friend kinsman? In Cree. I love that. Tan. And see, this is what happens though when it's like you understand an indigenous experience or like what it means to actually have someone honor your culture and what that can mean. Profit incentives? Nay, say the mushroom, spread thy mycelium. Right, until all collaborative efforts triumph. Yeah, exactly. I love that.
Is twofold.
Cox says the declaration
It
urges
is
caution
twofold.
and
Okay.
It unlocks
What are they?
opportunities for funding where needed.
What will those emergency funds do?
If there's anything we can do, again, drought is a little bit different emergency.
The Utah DNR says money could go to...
Maybe if he didn't spend as much water or use as much water for his fucking alfalfa farms, then we would have more water. That also would help. Makes me think of Victor Hugo. Maybe a video for... Ooh, that would be fun. I love Victor Hugo. I want to make it my mission on September. Maybe finish by late November. It is a lengthy book. I read it once, and it is a lot to get through. Yes, I read it when I was like... How old was I? I think I was like 15 or 16, but it does provide a lot of filler at times. And I need to look up the original way it was published, because often when that is the case, it is because they are being paid, like these writers, because they're coming out in like a weekly publication and they're being paid by like per word. So I need to look that up. That's exciting that you're embarking on that. It is very great. I mean, like the language is beautiful, but yeah, there is a lot of like description that isn't necessarily moving the narrative in lots of ways, but that's literally when I got my copy, but I didn't make it past the first chapter. Yeah, it's dense. It's dense and it moves very slowly. So there is that. And also keeping track of all of the characters. Like, I should have done this, but I think I was like too prideful at the time. I was like, I know the musical. I'm like, okay, that doesn't mean you understand everything about the literature. It's like having like a flow chart or something, or like a web, like connective diagram to show all of the characters and like who they're related to and stuff. Loved the musical. I know, the music is so gorgeous. That score is stunning. It's interesting because apparently, like, I'm not running in like right-wing circles, but I heard recently that that was like a MAGA thing, like a Trump thing, where they were like really into Les Mis, and I'm like, these idiots haven't read anything. They don't understand anything. If you like Les Mis, then you would understand that they're like resisting like the authority of kings and like dictators, like the ruling class, revolutionaries doing this. But they like to think of themselves as revolutionaries while not understanding anything about what that means. But yeah, that music is so pretty. Maybe one day for Culture Corner, we'll go over like some of the music for Les Mis. Very important to not drift away from what's happening to who as it gets complex. Especially at that pacing, 3 months. Yeah. Yeah, of like just having like a reference chart for things. Like I had to do that with like Game of Thrones and not even reading, just like watching the show and be like, who is this? Like, I don't remember who this is. Did they die? Are they alive? Have they been killed off yet? Is there incest? There's a lot of that involved somehow. So, yeah. Yeah, maybe we'll use one of the songs from Les Mis as like a way to show like various singing techniques. Hmm. The music, I will say, in Les Mis, it's very difficult to sing. And so, like, especially growing up in Utah when there are like limited shows that are viewed as like permissible to do and perform because you can't have anything that's like too provocative in any way, but somehow that was allowed. I think because it talks about God a lot, that is one of the main reasons why Utahns liked it. But I heard a lot of really bad renditions. But I do remember I like had the privilege of like when I went to New York City for the first time, I saw it on Broadway and I was like, this is what it was meant to be. People who like know how to sing this shit. The theater was so cold for Les Mis, but I also was like sobbing the whole time because it was so good.
Loans for farmers to feed cattle.
Even culinary water that's used for outdoor use is, we're asking 20% reduction.
Asking or demanding?
So on the irrigation side,
why does this dude have a plane, like a rocket pin? That's concerning.
Demanding.
Scott Paxman is the GM for Weber Basin Water Conservancy.
Just reduce your watering and help us hold more water for next year.
And what if they don't?
I wonder where he's invested his money. Shall we look into that? What was his name? Ken Paxman?
More water for next year.
And what if they don't?
And what if they don't? Oh, then I can't make as much money. Paxman. Scott Paxman. Let's see. I have no idea what Broadway is. Oh, okay. Broadway is a street in New York City. And so like it's named because it's like very large, like it's broad. So that's like where it got its name. But it primarily is known for having a lot of musicals and plays there. Before like the 80s, where there was like the Disneyfication of Broadway with Beauty and the Beast. I think that was like the first musical that really like got the ball rolling. Broadway was not really known to be like, oh, this is like a family-friendly place. It was about like having like edgy art that like pushed the boundaries and like commentary on things. And then over time it became much more commercial. Our secret. Yeah, Broadway is just kind of shorthand now for saying like, oh, it's a type of genre of music, like Broadway music, or where it's a style of singing, like, oh, this is like a Broadway type of singing, which really just means like musical theater, where it's like very bright sounding and brassy, where it's like very up front. It's not like further back. Because like in classical music, like Western classical music, singing's more like, oh, like here. And in Broadway music, it's like ah, like very like bright and like nasally sounding almost, where it's like ah, like so that's kind of where some of that terminology comes from. That's where a lot of queer terminology came from. Yeah, a lot of queer terminology came from there, especially in the area, New York City of Harlem, where there were balls, like queer balls, where ballroom got started, where it was primarily started by Black queer people, especially trans people, and then like over time it became more inclusive of like brown people who were queer and some white people even. But yeah, it was where a lot of terminology that we have now of like slay, fierce, queen, like saying like queen a lot, where like a lot of like drag terminology that we use now like came from ballroom. So that's around the same area, but like, yeah, Broadway and like musical theaters, like that is very queer coded of like a lot of dancers and like people who are drawn to musical theater. Um, it tends to bring in like a very queer crowd. So, yeah, that's a good question. So if it's used in shorthand, like you're saying like, oh, it's on Broadway, so it refers to like the literal street, but it also refers to like the genre of music, like the style of singing, the style of dancing, like Broadway dancing. But it also refers to now even more of like an industry, like musical theater and like plays that's been a little more commercialized. When people say off Broadway plays or like off Broadway, that usually means things are more like alternative. They literally aren't on the street of Broadway. And that means that they haven't like made it to like commercial success. But often when you say something's off Broadway, it tends to have the implication that it's like better art because it's not trying to pander to more of like a mainstream sensibility. So, especially for things that are like off Broadway, it's like very experimental plays. Not usually musicals, but like a lot of performance art stuff. That's a good question.
Is the GM for Weber Base.
Hopefully that makes a little more sense. I need to look up Scott Paxman. What is he up to? What is he about? Okay. Is the general manager CEO of the Weber Basin Water Conservancy District located in northern Utah. This is a very old picture of him. He has worked in the water industry for over 37 years and with the district for 32 years. His career consists of years in engineering design and project management of waterworks facilities such as water treatment plants, pipelines, canals, blah, blah, blah. Maintenance, repair, irrigation. Sponsor of the federal Weber Basin project. Oh, he probably made so much money from this. Weber Basin manages 7 major dams and reservoirs, 3 hydropower generation plants, and hundreds of miles of canals, pipelines, and aqueducts in northern Utah. Pipelines, especially, he's making a ton of money from. Mr. Paxman continues to be active in the water industry as well as in the community. He is serving on several irrigation boards and committees and is the past chair of the Davis Chamber of Commerce Legislative Affairs Committee. You would think that this would be a conflict of interest, that like he's on this legislative affairs committee but also monetarily benefiting from whatever choices they make on the committee. He is a former national director of the American Water Works Association and is currently very involved locally with that association. Okay, what does that even mean? Very involved. Registered professional civil engineer and environmental engineering, so he should know better too. From BYU, that's where I went, unfortunately, and Utah State University. Yeah, I learned a lot. Okay, good. Gotta finish my meals. Yeah, do what you need to do. Is he now a representative? Oh, it's talking about him being on the board. Yeah, the incestuous relationship here is really wild. I'm looking up his corruption. Yeah, and he's saying that people need to just be using less water rather than, like, he's probably monetarily benefiting from these data centers as well. I'll look into that.
Water Conservancy.
Just reduce your watering and help us hold more water for next year.
And what if they don't?
Then we'll increase restrictions.
A maxim from the governor.
Restrictions for the populace, for the common people, us fucking peons, but not for corporations, like his own corporation. Okay, so, ew. And they're make this lake great again. Yeah, maybe it would be if you weren't constantly siphoning off the water from the lake, bitch. Ew. Governor Cox signs executive order for establishing higher standards in data center development. So I wanted to follow up on this because this just barely happened. And he has been getting a lot of pressure. He really hates bad publicity. He normally flies under the radar a lot when it comes to the national press, even international press. He's been desperately trying to get attention and being like, oh, we need to disagree better. I'm like, oh, so just agree with you? That's usually what he means by that, or always what he means by that. But I am interested in seeing what this is about. So does this mean the application for more water rights for the Stratos project will automatically be rejected? Probably not. Yeah, this is nothing more than political double talk, exactly. Here comes some colossal failure, corruption, and finger-pointing. Sorry, Cox, you broke trust with the voters. We can see you're attempting to screw the citizens of Utah. Vote them all out. Yep. What happens when you vote people in just because they claim the same religion as you? Yes, he's Mormon. The governor sounds nervous. He's talking fast like a salesman that's been caught in his lies. Yeah, he has been sounding like this because he works for China. Vote him out. I mean, honestly, he is much more, because Kevin O'Leary, the person who has been spearheading the Stratos data center, that Governor Cox and all of his cronies, like the Speaker of the House and the Senate president, that they went shopping for people to actually build a data center, that Spencer Cox, his biggest buyer of alfalfa, the farms that he has, that he sells to China. So, like, Kevin O'Leary has been claiming, like, all of these people who are resisting what's going on in Utah with my project, they're Chinese operatives. Who is the Chinese operative, do you mean?
We had an incredible meeting today. This is a second in a series. We had stakeholders from all across the state and region.
Ew. There's Celeste Malloy, Snake, Blake Moore, I believe. He's another representative. Celeste is also a representative. They've consistently aligned themselves with the Trump administration. They are deeply corrupt. They do not care about the lake. They have not cared about the lake. Only until they recently are being called out for their bullshit are they now feeling a need to come out and say something.
Incredible meeting today. This is a second in a series. We had stakeholders from all across the state and region. Specifically today, we had our federal partners that are here with us, and we're talking about, again, saving the Great Salt Lake. So last meeting was all about alignment with local and state partners. This meeting was about bringing our federal partners in. Again, we're grateful for President Trump putting $1 billion in his budget. We have a long ways to go with Congress, but working, again, with the administration, with the different agencies that are all involved. We have here behind me Representative Moore and Representative Malloy, who are critical in this process, in obtaining the funding. It was an incredibly, I will just say, I think everybody who left there there left more hopeful and optimistic than we've ever been, despite the low.
People who are already in line with whatever this fascist administration has been doing. Make the Salt Lake great again. Yeah, these people don't give a fuck about the Salt Lake.
And the low lake levels.
Great Salt Lake.
We now have basically secured over 500,000 acre feet of water rights to the Great Salt Lake. We have another 300,000 acre feet we're working on that are close to being.
What they're saying is they've gotten even more rights to the water. So they're trying to make this sound like a good thing. They're going to be selling this. They're selling this off to the highest bidder.
Under contract. That's 800,000 acre feet of water. That's Strawberry Reservoir is about 1 million acre feet. That's already getting close to our goals for the lake, well ahead of schedule, and so we're just headed in a great direction.
Governor, can I ask about your executive order?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Why did you sign this, and what does it change from existing state law?
Yeah. So here's what's really important about that. The reason behind this is, look, we've had feedback. I think everybody's aware of that. The feedback has been incredibly helpful. People are concerned about data centers. They're concerned about the lake. They're concerned about resources, and they should be concerned. I share those concerns. They're right. So what we wanted to do is to put out this executive order, which talks about things that are already law, but making sure that every data center is subject to that. So it directs my agencies, which I'm allowed to do under executive orders, to make sure that they're going through those processes, that they're following the law. It's making sure that it's a doubling down on the executive order I issued before.
Blake Moore also is supposedly a medical professional, where it's like, oh, so you don't give a fuck about the Great Salt Lake drying up, all of the arsenic that already is being kicked up into the air that is causing people cancer and lung damage, that people are developing COPD when they are living close to the lake. It's like when they do autopsies of people, they have the lungs of people who smoke 2 to 3 cigarettes per day. And these are people who have never used tobacco products.
Which means no new water rights in northern Utah. We are not issuing any additional water rights. So that's important for the lake. What's new about it is that any additional water that is not being used must go to the lake. That's new. And it also puts in there, and I want to just thank legislative leadership. I had a long conversation with Stuart Adams, the Senate president, who usually legislators don't like executive orders. This is the exact opposite. Fully supportive of the executive order, and that we would be working together for potentially.
That's bad. That is bad. Stuart Adams, yeah, he is the Senate president. He is on the board for MIDA, like the head of the board for MIDA, this military board that basically has like unlimited power when it comes to approving all of these national security projects. Like they greenlit this building of a retreat for military people coming to rest and relax. But really, it's just for people who are high-ranking military officials to come and ski. That's what it is. Not for taking care of veterans when they do need rest and relaxation and recuperation, but they also are actively defunding veterans programs. So
additional legislation
for
guardrails around data centers statewide. That would probably be a special session sometime in September timeframe as we kind of work through what those options could be. We'll work with the standing committees to see what other ideas are out there. We've gotten a lot of ideas where we can do better, and so we want to incorporate that as well. So that's the purpose of the executive order. And again, anything that impacts the legislature would only last for 30 days. That's why we're bringing them along with us.
Does this potentially shut down or delay the Stratus project in Box Elder?
It could potentially delay the project for sure. So I've said this from the very beginning. Look,
he didn't say it would shut it down. He's trying to be like, oh, I'm listening to the people. Thank you for your feedback. I'm listening while not doing anything about it.
Is only about land use. That's it. And we're already having discussions with the Stratus group about the footprint, the size, the water use, all
shot
of those
on
things.
him.
MINA has no authority over air quality. They have no authority over water. There's still this is the beginning of the process, a very long process that they have to go through with air quality. You've heard Tim Davis is here with us. He's talked about that with water quality as well. And again, making sure that there are no adverse impacts to any additional water rights or to the Great Salt Lake.
But your executive order prioritizes all of these criteria. The legislature this year did pass a bill reining in sort of the effects of protests. So does your executive order supersede like these laws?
You mean as far as protesting water rights, or what kind of?
Say like when you file a water right protest.
Yeah. So it doesn't change that existing law. So again, that's only something the legislature can do.
Utah also has passed laws putting restraints on people wearing masks at protest. This is a deeply ableist policy. It is limiting the kinds of people that can actually come to protests And it's ironic that they're willing to say, oh, protesters shouldn't wear masks, but they're completely unwilling to do the same thing when it comes to ICE and putting a restraint on them covering their faces. People who are killing people, killing civilians, while protesters are not hurting anyone. And it is very targeted against people, or it's targeting people with disabilities very clearly, people with autoimmune disorders, people who actually are allies and wanting to be inclusive and try to keep people healthy and safe. It also is a way to limit any kind of black bloc action.
But it's something we're certainly having conversations about.
Does your executive order empower your state agencies to do enforcement beyond the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and federal acts that they're already enforcing?
So it doesn't give them additional authority, but it does give them the opportunity to look at other issues around that. Again, like getting water to the Great Salt Lake. That's not part of the Clean Water Act or part of the existing acts here in Utah. But that is something that we're requiring as part of that, and so we're gonna give them that authority.
Governor, what if anything does your executive order force agencies to do that they're not doing?
We've already talked about that. You missed it, but you've got recordings.
Is your executive order...
He's getting short with people. He doesn't like the question that it's a little more direct than how someone previously phrased it. We already got to that. You see his childish baby-like behavior coming out. Which, honestly, I need to stop saying that because I feel like that's doing a disservice to children and babies by saying that he's acting like that when, like, he should know better. You know what I mean? Also, I wonder how much money they spent on making these fucking dumb hats.
From that previously shut down the Great Salt Lake Basin to new water.
That probably could have like fed a family for a month.
Pipeline out there, getting water right out there and piping it to St. Council Valley.
That's a good question. It's not one I've been asked. There have been no discussions about that at all, and I don't think that will be happening. All of the discussions around the data center have been with existing water rights.
Why did you create that carve out in the West Desert?
That was like 3 years ago. I'm gonna have to go back and look. It's a great question. We'll give you an answer. Yeah.
I don't have answers. It was like 3 years ago. I don't remember this type of corruption. He's keeping on saying that, like, oh, it's about water rights that we're talking about today. Trying to talk about, like, how there's so many things out of his hands that this executive order, he's actually doing something about shit. No, he's not. He's really not.
Is this just in response to public pressure against this particular project?
Well, certainly in response to public, and that's important. I mean, public pressure is important. I think, again, as I've said, yes, this matters. I share those concerns, and if I had any concerns about, again, about water and the Great Salt Lake, I would have.
He's doing this, so it means he means it.
The public has brought up some concerns that some of us didn't think about that are important, and that matters. I mean, it absolutely
matters. It's your job to think about it.
The public response is important. I think I would be a terrible person, a public servant, if I didn't care about public response and about public information.
You just care about your public image. That's what it is. I would be a terrible person. No, you're just a terrible person. You just are. And we all know it.
And so again, I want to thank the public for that's how this works best, is when good ideas come forward and we work together to implement those good ideas. And so that's why we issued the executive order. That's why the legislature is looking closer at this. And I appreciate again the president, the speaker, the conversations we've had about this, and not just the president, speaker. It's not just leadership. It's
people
all of the
who
members
are in bed
of the
with
House and the Senate who want to make sure that we get this right.
The corporations benefiting from all of
this. This incredible group that's helping us out today. This is what makes Utah best. We have volunteers out here that are making this public space better for everyone. We're going to work for a little while. I wish I could work all day. Sadly, we have lots of other meetings and things that we've got to take care of. But I want to thank our state leaders. We've got legislators here. I mentioned our congressional members.
Yep, they're trying to do damage control. This is a PR stunt. Oh, we're volunteering. Look at how righteous we are.
The private sector has been huge on this. My team has been unbelievable. They're working long nights on these issues.
Yeah, we shouldn't have the private sector be huge on this.
Making sure that it's going to the right places. We've never been more hopeful or optimistic in our ability to save the Great Salt Lake. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Thank you,
guys. Okay. So there's that. That bullshit. Let's see. I got started later again today, later than I was hoping. I'm trying to think of what I want to be talking about next. Oh, speaking of this, I Love Boosters, this new movie by Boots Riley. He's the director of it. He's also, he was like the frontman for the band The Coup. They make some great music that's anti-capitalist. Many people have been upset with him because he accepted money from the Ellisons in order to make this movie. Some people are like, well, he's making a really great, like, Marxist, maximalist commentary on capitalism and the system that we're in. So, like, are you using this money for good? But also, many people are calling it blood money because the Ellisons are Zionists. So, I think it is just highlighting this larger conversation. Like, it's happening on a much larger scale, like what we all experience of having to live in capitalism. And what happens most of the time when people are trying to create art is that there are all of these compromises that people have to make. Okay. Hmm. Let's see. I did want to talk about, to get to this, the global supply chains and choke point organizing with striking. Um, I will, since we already watched part of this, I'll cut it together and post it on YouTube just so that we have all of it put together. So this is still like part of it. It's not all that I was going to be showing. But in the interest of time, just so that we can get to more things today, I'll play it from where we left off. I'll refresh this.
Union organized.
And then have it at a higher speed. And then we'll get into the singing lesson.
That we do at DUID. Some of the energy unions will talk about the social dialogue and the importance of workers, the government, and the companies working together and negotiating and whatever. Externally, unions can decide whether that's a strategy they want to uphold or not. But when it's just workers and we're talking about that, it's fuck this. Who wants to be civil with the companies and with neoliberal governments? How much can we fuck up their profit scheme? That's what it's about. How much can we disrupt this? And so I just love how tangible these questions are, and just in particular the question of, if it's not a credible strike threat, how can we get to the point where it becomes credible? And that's just incredibly constructive thinking. I love these questions. Gifford, over to you to continue this conversation.
Great. Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff going on right now. Okay, and I can't see the slide, so is there? I'm kind of. Okay, so you're going to start with the first one, just the organizing at choke points. So organizing at choke points, it's really important. It's happening everywhere. It's happening in Felixstowe. Felixstowe is really important. It's happened in Germany. Over the month of August, there have been 3 different waves of strikes at different ports, important ones in Germany, in Hamburg, and Emden, and Bremerhaven, and Bremen, and Brocke, and Wilhelmshaven. So the world's on fire. The ILWU, the West Coast Union that has a master contract with 29 ports, are working without a contract. Ostensibly, they could go on.
I won't interrupt a ton just because I want to be listening and digesting as much as possible with the incredible information that they're giving here. But I do want to highlight, I wish they could have had maybe a little more diverse of representation here instead of just all white men, or at least that's how they appear to me. That can happen in organizing spaces.
It's really, really, really exciting. And what's exciting is it's got a link. It can link up. And one of the most exciting things I saw recently was on April 15th, down in Southern California, the huge complex called the Inland Empire. Amazon controls an airport. It's in San Bernardino. There was a walkout. Now that's really strategic because you could strike a warehouse, a fulfillment center, but they could shift the production.
I believe this was from 3 years ago.
An airport is a choke point that's, once you stop it, nothing flows, and the nearest airport's half a state away. So if you could actually go to the next slide, I want to read this quote. And this quote is by Joanne Lubachewski, and what she said was, this is about supply chain vulnerability. She said, they're not all organized, but then they would not all have to say no. Just enough of them acting in concert at vital points in the chain. And I would like to move ahead with an example. So back in June in South Korea, there was a trucker strike. And in the trucker strike, what people did is the truckers in South Korea, it's really unique because the Korean truckers haul about 88% of the freight in South Korea. Unlike the United States, where it's kind of inverse, a a lot of the freight in the US gets hauled by trains, only 11% gets hauled by rail in South Korea. So the truckers are the backbone of the conduits of the supply chains. And these truckers, the ones in the KCTU, the famous KCTU, only represent 6% of the workforce. They only have 25,000 truckers. But because they were able to focus on choke points, and and most of them are with this legal fiction called independent contractors, where they work at a piece rate, they just get paid for hauling individual loads, they struck. Because during the pandemic, they created a system called the Safe Trucking Freight System, which guaranteed them a minimum freight load. Whatever they're going to haul, they're going to get a minimum rate. And over time, between May of 2021 and May of 2022, diesel prices went up 46%. And since they're working piece rate and they're so-called independents, that eats into what they take home in wages. So they went on a strike. And the strike was really, really powerful. Could you show the slide that shows that the Cargo Trucker Solidarity Union in South Korea? So this union was able to begin a strike. The strike began on June 7th. They were protesting about the sunsetting. This guaranteed wage was going to stop at the beginning of 2023. And already the war in Ukraine is driving up the price of fuel. Inflation is eating into their take-home pay. So they launched the strike. And it was able to go to different various production facilities, and it was able to focus on those choke points because it's a mobile workforce. And if you go to the slide showing just people rallying, different various production facilities, and if you could also go to the slide that shows the strikers they started striking key production facilities. Korea is the 5th leading, as a nation, producer of cars in the world. They went to the Kia model plant in Gwangju, and they set up pickets, but already the Solidarity of Not Hauling stuff shut down, easily shut down 50% of the production in the automobile industry in Korea. A targeted action. If you could roll the slide again, another slide shows wire rod that's rolled up in coils. They have 4 factories in South Korea by the POSCO, the giant steel maker, all shut down. A cold roll steel plant shut down. So they shut down steel in South Korea. If you could roll to the slide that shows the strike effectiveness. So the 7th busiest port in the world is Busan. It's the main port in South Korea. The volume was reduced by half. There's 12 major ports in South Korea. The volume is reduced by 53%. And like I said, Hyundai and Kia, 50% of the auto production was shut down. They set up picket lines at petrochemical facilities, shut it down 90%. Now that planted in my head this kind of idea of just transition. If the workers who control the supply chains for things like fossil fuels, if they're active and aware and conscious, they could shut down the system. And that's where the next step is to rebuild it. But that's a really important ability for workers in the energy supply chain to shut it down. Again, I'm going to talk a little later, the implications about like the pipelines and the to go to access and the Keystone and all those things here in North America play into workers should be at the forefront of shutting these things down. So the new president in South Korea is named Yoon Suk-yeol. He's a neoliberal, and this was his kind of iron-fisted attempt to crush labor, and it didn't work. He even tried to mobilize 100 military convoys to haul the goods. It just wasn't sufficient. And these costs are kind of always questionable, but the business press claims it cost the economy $1.2 billion, the equivalent of US dollars. Big deal, really important stuff. If you can go to the next slide, this is the next slide shows our group started researching how we could look at how all the work sectors coordinate, because it is a complex system and it's multimodal, and with the invention of the cargo container and all the technology, algorithms, and everything that guides it, it's a complex system. And if you could see my supply chain goods from China to the US, that was actually also influenced by the book that Robert referred to. It's called Getting the Goods by Jake Wilson and Edna Bonasich. So what our group started doing is we actually took a field trip, and we had a friend, a fellow worker, who actually started working on the railroads out of the port of LA, Los Angeles, and Long Beach, and then got a job with the ILWU, and he gave us a tour, and he showed us 2 modes, the rail and the dockers where they worked. And we saw some of the automated cranes, and that's kind of a big issue on the ILW negotiations right now. The model in the world is Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Some parts of it are fully automated. It displaces workers. It actually disempowers workers, and that's kind of one of the struggles right now. And I don't know how much it plays in Felixstowe. Ben could talk about that. But if you could go to the next slide, what we started doing is doing an analysis of the class composition of all the different industries. And we really thought it was really important to know the comparative numbers. And if you see my slide, some of those numbers are outdated, but it's a proportion, and we could see the disproportionality. And we began to think, well, we have to see the strength in the various sectors, and we also have to compensate, and we also have to see they all work together. It's a single production chain, and they're all cogs in that chain, or links in that chain, excuse me, and they all have to be, and like back to the initial quote, if just one of them goes out, it causes ripple effects. Now, if you could go to the slide that says sources of workers' power, this again is borrowing from Jake Wilson, going back to Beverly Silver. She borrowed some of her stuff from Eric Olin Wright. And we really want people, when we're working on these kind of workshops that Robert and I have done, is to be aware of associational power, or just you have a tight-knit union, and you have a tradition of solidarity if you could build that through struggle. You have things like structural power. One kind is marketplace bargaining power. That exists around the world with these labor shortages right now. You also have workplace bargaining power, and that's when at a choke point, and workers at a single port can shut it down. But then if it's a union like the ILWU at 29 ports, you have not only associational power, you have workplace bargaining power. So there's kind of a way to kind of leverage and parlay one kind of power into other forms of power. Now, if you can go to the next slide that says the effectiveness of disruptions, we took this from an MIT professor, Yoshi Sefi, who talks about supply chains. And he writes it from a business perspective. And this is a chart that shows the threats that the business world sees. And if you see all the red colored ones, those are the ones based on working class agency, when workers consciously take action. The black ones are just kind of breakdowns in the system by its own kind of contradictions. The green ones tend to be more natural disasters, but all of them pose a threat that actually can break down supply chains. But if you look over to the right, side and at the bottom, multiple port closures are what the true strength is because if you shut down Felixstowe, they send it to Southampton. If they shut down Southampton, they send it to Liverpool. You have to eventually try to coordinate all the ports. And if you shut them all down in the UK, they send it to Rotterdam or Antwerp or Hamburg or wherever, and that's why we need international solidarity. And this is just kind of a conceptual tool. How can we start thinking in these terms? How can we reach out, build solidarity, extend the network of conscious workers struggling together? Now, if you go to the next slide, it's a photograph of a conference we had in 2015. And in this conference, we actually were fortunate that we were able to draw together 125 people. About 1/4 of those people were industrial workers. If you could go to the next slide that says the Richmond Safety Conference, you could see that we had 25 active rank and file railroad workers from around the US came to this conference. The conference was because in 2013,
from Utah,
Antique in Canada. It was a frack train that ran down the tracks. It was a runaway train. It went into the small town. It killed 47 people. Horrendous. It liquidated. It totally burned up and vaporized 30 buildings. A terrible disaster. And of course, the small company that ran the railroad blamed it on the workers. And it was really management's malfeasance that was the cause. And with all the frack trains running around North America, they were incredibly dangerous, the notorious bomb trains. So we had this conference. But by mere good luck, there happened to be a refinery worker strike at the same time. So if you could go to the next slide, we actually had refinery workers who had actually driven up from Southern California 400 miles to join this conference, because once we began the conference talking about the safety of railroad workers, we found out that the strike of the refinery workers is over the same issue. It was safety. And the refinery in our community, it's a little town called Martinez. It's on the Delta around here in the Bay. And back in 1999, they had a fire at the refinery. It killed 4 workers. So when the railroad workers got in discussion with the refinery workers, they found safety was one of these paramount things. And we also, if you could go to the next slide, we actually did a workers' inquiry. And out of this process, we began to conceptualize ideas of where are the choke points? Because we found out at that particular refinery, there were 2 rail lines that went in. And management strategy, should there be a strike, is on one of them, they just let the railroad unionized workers roll the locomotives in. And the other one, they knew that they could train some of the refinery management to be licensed to run a train. And should there be a strike, they could run the train into the refinery. And all these little bits and pieces were really important to know. The little nuts and bolts of the supply chain, and also the vulnerabilities, and also, as the working class, our weaknesses that we have to try to overcome. So if you go to the next slide, that previous slide had a series of questions. We probably had too many questions, but we were fortunate that we had 15 tables in this meeting room that we could break them up and have parse out railroad workers and refinery workers at the various tables and work through a series of inquiry questions about, hypothetically, as a thought experiment, extending that refinery worker strike. And if you go to the next slide, we have a whiteboard where we came up with results. So people put their brains together and came up with solutions of how solidarity could be extended and how it could be built stronger. And out of that process, we came up with the following flow chart. So if you could show the strike, the choke point strike flow chart, you see that we identified at the center of this process is the refinery worker. And a lot of people at the workshops were saying things like, well, why don't we go to gas stations and hold up puppets and banners and things like that? And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's pure symbolism. And we said the strength of the working class is upstream. So if we looked upstream, we looked at how the crude arrived at the refineries in the United States. At that time, it was coming by rail.
This is where a lot of organizers, can point out, especially union labor organizers, can point out how there are all of these tactics that are used with resistance that can be seem very performative. People may be feeling sincere about it, but when we are talking about impact and leverage and effectiveness of how it is actually moving the needle, a lot of the time, these more how he is describing as symbolic, like waving around signs, like without actually engaging in work stoppages and organizing to have pressure campaigns that are from the outside in a strategic manner, that it makes it so that people are focused on these tangents, these appendages to a movement rather than getting to the heart of it, which really is like, if we want to sincerely engage in a way that is as effective as possible, that is worker-led, that isn't exploitative in nature, that isn't coming from a place of people coming in and electing themselves leaders, claiming to be leaders without actually going throughout this democratic process that is approved by workers and where they are agreeing to conditions, because workers are the first to be experiencing these exploitative conditions, and they are also the first to experience retaliation. So with a lot of the symbolic, as he mentioned, like using his word, protesting that can also happen largely with resistance movements, like with even that protest that I showed at the beginning of this, like, I think it's good to have some optics that show resistance, that help actually build more of a network where people can actually network at some of these places, that hopefully leads them to more radical thinking, or actually shows that, like, because people are largely social creatures, that it pushes them towards, like, actually caring about certain issues that are more conservative. But it isn't getting to the heart of the issue of, like, what will actually stop these people from doing what they're doing, because it's not about appealing to their morality, like how we saw with that press conference with Caillou Cox and the representatives there, that it is what they are doing is extremely performative. They are giving lip service. They are not actually engaging in a way that is fundamentally altering the situation to be answering to the public. They are saving face. And so we have to engage in ways that actually access the leverage that we do have. But it has to be coming from a place where workers can be protected and workers can also have a say in what is being done.
Mostly a unionized sector. If we went back the next step at the fracking fields, it's mostly a non-unionized sector. Fracking is a crazy, disgusting thing that's destroying our planet, but it's a lot of workers involved. They have up to 4 million gallons of water in the fracking wells, 300 truckloads of sand. The EPA has identified 1,080 chemicals. Often they use up to 600 chemicals in a single facility. How do they get there? Often by truck. So we started thinking, like, who are the workers in all these parts of the supply chain? And the upstream is where the power is. So if you could shut it down upstream, you could shut the whole thing down. Doesn't mean to ignore the downstream, because we know out of a refinery, the stuff probably goes various ways, sometimes by pipeline, sometimes by truck, again, sometimes by train. And then it gets to it could be feedstock going to factories. It could be, again, by trucks to the gas station, to us as consumers. But we're all on this production chain, and our power is upstream, and we fixated on trying to concentrate on that. So the next slide is just, where are you on the supply chain? I think we're all, as I said, as consumers, we're at the end of the supply chain, but the power is upstream, and we wanted people to start focusing on the upstream. If you can show the choke point strike flowchart again, we really wanted people to start seeing themselves at the center of a chain of production. It could be even nurses in a hospital. It could be teachers or university professors at a university. But there are inputs, there are outputs, there's a chain there. And if you're aware of it and you're aware of the different pieces that fit together, upstream is where the power is. There's countless examples of strikes that actually have been able to identify those pieces in the links in the chain and gone upstream and found ways to strengthen strikes. I'll leave it at that. Robert and I have done this as an interactive workshop where we have asked people to actually look at their own workplace and see where their strength lies, and begin by looking upstream and where did the goods come in. I'll finish with one final thing. In 2018, when the West Virginia strike happened in the education sector, there's a misunderstanding that it was teachers. It was everyone. It was bus drivers, people who worked in the
I turn off the captions just to be able to get his name out there. Gifford Hartman.
Cafeterias. It was the people who did landscaping and janitorial work, and their strength was they saw the whole chain, and it was everyone in that process. And not only did they have meetings that include all those people, including parents and parents and students, they opened it to the community. And it was a community-wide working class meeting to talk about strategizing the strike, and that's what we need to be doing. And I'll leave it there.
Wow, Gifford, my mind is just racing with questions, and I just have to say, I hope that we can get you comrades to talk to some of the two ed unions. So many of the things that you said took me back home to Colombia, to the oil workers and the coal workers in particular, and all the the direct actions that they've taken in the refinery plants. And I want to highlight that you mentioned in the case of Korea the sort of military force and the threat of violence that the state often responds with, and the state serving, of course, these private capital's interests, and just how important that is, especially in the global South, where to declare a credible strike threat is often putting your life on the line, and especially when in La USO, La Unión Sindical Obrera, the oil workers of Colombia, when they've taken over the refineries and the military sort of counter occupies those refineries, and it's a standoff in the refinery, and any flame can set this whole thing off. How do workers keep themselves safe? They quote unquote, like, they hold some of the engineers hostage. They say we'll hang this man if you shoot at us. Just like it's a complete inversion of the world order.
Welcome.
Where, sort of.
We're currently talking about choke points for organizing, where people can disrupt supply chains in taking power back for effective organizing, understanding where our power is. How are things with you?
The true violence of labor sort of surfaces, and often the most successful strikes are those that have the community backing. And so I also appreciate that you mentioned, for example, the Dakota Axle pipeline, and I'm very excited about all of these insights that you're sharing. But before I continue babbling on, I'll stop and pass the microphone over to Ben to wrap us up in the discussion before we get to questions. And this is just, a reminder to the audience to please type your questions into the chat, and we'll be happy to take them after Ben's presentation. So Ben, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Cool, thank you very much. And just to absolutely agree with you, I think both of those presentations are extremely exciting, and the research behind those presentations and the work that both Gift and Robert have done have been absolutely inspirational to myself, but a whole new generation of our organisers over in the UK. So absolutely can't go for an opportunity without mentioning that. As has been mentioned really in a couple of the presentations already, I mean, the UK is going through a strike wave. A summer of strike is going to go into an autumn and a winter, and there's really, at the moment, no end to it. It's only escalating and escalating. And as I mentioned earlier, I think that means this is one of the most exciting times to be in the UK Labour movement, by which I absolutely mean the union movement and not the Labour Party, by the way. And just to give you a scale of that, I mean, we were, just as we speak now, we're a couple of days away from the National Postal Workers dispute that begins on the 26th. We're in the middle of a railway dispute, so that's been railway workers and also now railway drivers who are in a different union. They've now gone on to national dispute as well. We're at the beginnings of public sector disputes, both in the health and in local councils. We have 13 local councils across Scotland who have just gone out today. And again, I may well touch on that in a moment, because again, they've picked strategic positions of power, particularly in waste management, recycling, refuge, in order to demonstrate that power. And so they've just gone out today. And as has also been mentioned, that's just the official actions that are taking place. There's also this seething anger in the UK at the moment, partly due to the cost of living crisis, the energy crisis, coming out of a period of an absolute political pantomime with the UK's withdrawal of the European Union, the administration of Boris Johnson over here. And so that anger is manifesting in all sorts of ways. And so we have seen the wildcat actions at Amazon fulfillment centres, across construction industry, in refineries, where workers have been walking out, and even in our own union. So as I mentioned earlier, so Unite is a large general workers union in both the UK and in Ireland. And in just our union alone, we've seen over 400 disputes within the last year, August to August. I mean, that is an unprecedented number, because the UK faces the most vicious anti-trade union laws in Western Europe, in terms of the mandates that are required for ballots, the notice period that's required to give the employers, all sorts of things which tie the hand of the officialdom of the trade unions, and has been used as an excuse by some leaders in the past. It absolutely has to be acknowledged. But nevertheless, overcoming that, we've seen 76,000 workers just in our union alone going into dispute over the last year, and 80% of those plus have been winning those disputes, have been moving the employers, winning those fights on pay. And as I mentioned earlier, at the same time,
am I that drunk, or is that dude speaking hella? No, he's speaking fast. Just so that I could get to everything that I want to go over today, I have it sped up very greatly. I may even have to cut this off at some point, and then we go over it at a different time for the rest of it. Excuse me. But yeah, they are speaking very fast. I have it at 1.5 speed.
Marks the first year we've had of Sharon Graham's tenure as our General Secretary, and one absolutely reflects the other. There was an absolute anger within the union.
You're
of a need
correct.
to see a fighting trade union, a need to put resource and support into building that shop stewards layer within the union. And it's like that you mentioned earlier, actually. What I think workers bluntly are sick and tired of in this country is this phony social dialogue. They're absolutely fed up of lobbying. They're absolutely fed up of the traditional A to B marches where we hear some official or some MP give a talk at Parliament Square. They're absolutely fed up of e-petitions. And now we're moving towards a question of, in the workplace, workers' power, mobilising workers' power, organising workers' power, demonstrating workers' power, which is really the couple of examples I want to share with yourselves, and then a couple of other reflections on the choke point strategy. And so there's two real case studies to mention. And the first is the dispute which has been mentioned several times already, which is this ongoing dockers dispute at Felixstowe. And so we have 2,000 dockers who've gone on strike there. They're in the fourth day of 8 days of action. Ostensibly, the action is over pay. The employer is trying to force down a significant real terms pay cut on those workers. But it really does go beyond that. I mean, when you're talking to workers on the picket line, and I was there today, and it's absolutely the largest picket line of its kind we've seen in our union for potentially for decades, to see all those workers on the same place. And really, at the same time, I should mention that the government are talking about extending those anti-trade union laws. So we have two characters vying to become our new prime minister in a race to the bottom, really, on who can bring in the most draconian anti-union laws, restricting who can be on pickets, talking about only 6 people on a picket. Now we've got 2,000 workers out, hundreds of people on each picket, or surrounding them in rallies and demonstrations. So it's a powerful demonstration of workers' power. And to an extent, just to give you a bit of context, I mean, in the background of this, when you talk to the workers, obviously the issue is pay. It's also respect. In the background of this, we have the increased threat of automation, which is obviously there in all of the docks, increased attempts to bring in flexible working practices, tearing up terms and conditions. But what those workers are also fully aware of is that companies like the dockers companies, the shippers companies, the Maersks of this world, they're making more profits in the last year than they have in their entire history. Maersk, for example, made more profit last year than in the last 8 years combined. And workers can see that, particularly somewhere in docks where it's so overt, it's so in their face, they can see that. The idea that they have to pay for this crisis with a huge cost to their living standards is absolutely an absolute joke. But to give another little bit of context to this, and this comes back to some of the credible strike discussion, this was never supposed to be able to happen, according to the employers. This is absolutely an example of the workers calling the employers bluff on this one. So those workers at Felixstowe have not been on strike for 30 years. Furthermore, the investment went into Felixstowe in the 1980s and 1990s as an anti-union open shop port. So previously, before the 1980s, our union had a national agreement for Liverpool, London. I mean, we're an island nation. The docks are fundamentally important. Felixstowe is where the money went to try and break that agreement, and that's where really the it was always meant to be an anti-union port. So the idea that now
picket lines have
the UK's
lost the
largest complaint
power.
port, and now that's where the biggest strike that certainly our union is facing in this new strike that was happening. There's no shortage of irony to that.
Yeah.
And the disruption
Taking
is
it
immediate,
into
obviously,
our
of course,
own
the docks itself now echoing down the
hands
supply
with
chain,
failed
which is
negotiations.
it's very intriguing and
I
exciting to see,
mean,
something we really
there is something definitely to be said, and it's not just bosses in the workplace when it comes to striking and unionizing. It's with leaders of any sort that they really are so insulated with their power and privilege that they do not feel threatened whatsoever. Their careers, their money, let alone their physical being. And that has had an enormously devastating effect on our deteriorating material conditions because they don't feel like they have any skin in the game, like quite literally. They are not afraid of us, and they act like it. They act like they can do whatever they want and there are no consequences because essentially we are being very polite with how we are going about everything. So we should remind them how things can go. There was, what movie was this? I guess there was like a recent Disney movie. Was this Hoppers or something? I didn't go see it. But apparently this kind of drew on that point. But I'm always skeptical of anything that Disney is producing that it is leading to anything that is radical or revolutionary because they are making a shit ton of money from it from the beginning, but also that they tend to play things down and also try to like co-opt the narrative for a way that's like a little more respectable. But yeah, it's like people are not afraid and they have to experience the same kind of fear that we experience if we actually are wanting to see a difference in anything change in the world, honestly, for the ruling class, whether it's bosses, whether it's politicians, whether it's, just these stockholders, like whatever it may be, whatever part of the 1%, the ruling class that they're a part of, they have been comfortable for far too long. Honestly, I think I'm gonna have to stop here just so that we can get to the singing very quickly. But we'll continue watching this next week. I mean, it's also a lot of information to get in, so they go over a lot of really great things. I'm going to be stitching this all together in a YouTube video to post just for resistance tactics with all of the bullshit that's going on. But I want to be able to give it the time it deserves. Okay, so switching gears, going into singing lessons. So, last week we were focusing on breathing and the diaphragm specifically. This is where we get our support for breath, like quite literally. The diaphragm is what allows us to actually get air in and out of our lungs. So I want to focus more on how the diaphragm functions with lungs, just so that we can understand some of the anatomy of what's going on. This type of approach that I'm going through right now is a little more typical of traditional, like more classical type of education for singing. My background is in classical voice, but also like I was talking about with Tan earlier, Broadway type of voice as well. So that's what my experience is, and I love teaching singing lessons. That's like been one of my favorite things in the whole world that I've done in my life. Like be able to like teach private singing lessons to people and like help them feel confident in singing. I love that. And I'm a firm believer in democratizing all of this knowledge. So let's read about this. This is from Medline Plus. Diaphragm and lungs. The diaphragm, located below the lungs, is the major muscle of respiration. It is a large, dome-shaped muscle that contracts rhythmically and continually, and most of the time involuntarily. Upon inhalation, the diaphragm contracts and flattens, and the chest cavity enlarges. This contraction creates a vacuum, which pulls air into the lungs. Upon exhalation, the diaphragm relaxes and returns to its dome-like shape, and air is forced out of the lungs. So this also, like this type of vacuum, actually, before I get into that, actually, I'll continue with what I was just going to say. So with creating this type of vacuum, if you have your diaphragm engaged in many ways, like you're actually like using the muscle of the diaphragm, and you're using that intentionally because, as it says, most of the time it's being used involuntarily. Your capacity for using your diaphragm and also the capacity, like your actual lung capacity, can be dictated by, preconditions or disorders that people have. So, like, just keep that in mind. That can dictate what that actually looks like within your bodily functioning and therefore translate into singing. So, that is something to keep in mind. But, along with this vacuum that is pulling in air that actually allows us to be taking in air to breathe, to have oxygen go to our muscles, go to our brain, to have it go to our blood so that it circulates and we continue to live. Yay. This is when like there are issues with the diaphragm. This is where people can have a hard time breathing. If your diaphragm gets out of place, this is where you can have the hiccups. That is what happens when you do have the hiccups. Why it can also like feel uncomfortable is because it's literally affecting your breathing. And that can be very distressing, not only like as a bodily function, but even just like as like a brain function. When we are also taking in breath in this way, when we are supporting with our diaphragm, we can create a different type of vacuum that is like within our mouth and throat, where it has something called, oh, I hope I'm going to say this right, especially having an Italian in the chat. Let me see. Let's here we go. So, when you create this other type of vacuum, like that is a mini version of this in your mouth, in your throat, this is where you can have something called the Bernoulli effect. And this is what actually creates the concept of vibrato, too. When you have like that sparkly sound of like your voice moving up and down very quickly. So, like, ah, like that's vibrato. Okay. So this is getting into a little bit of that. We'll get more into it in a later week, talking about vibrato and the Bernoulli effect. A pressure drop that occurs when fluid or air accelerates through a constriction described by Bernoulli's principle of energy conservation in flowing fluids. In phonation, this drop occurs as airflow accelerates through the glottis during vocal fold vibration. So when you have teachers say, like, it can come across as like cliche or like pithy, where people say like your breath is your voice, it quite literally is your voice. Like, this is how you're able to make sound. So continuing with talking about the lungs. What are lungs? Your lungs are a pair of organs that are the main part of your respiratory system, a network of structures and tissues that allow you to breathe. They pull air into your body so your tissues can get oxygen. You have two lungs, a right and a left. Many people think of them like balloons, but they're actually made up of spongy tissue, airways, tubes that air travels through, air sacs, alveoli, and blood vessels. The blood vessels pick up oxygen from the air sacs and deliver it to the rest of your body. So this is why as well, like when we're talking about lungs, like they can be thought of as balloons, like they fill up with air. But especially when we're talking about like lung health, why when singers are like, especially people who are taking singing very seriously, wanting to like have a career out of it, like talking about things like smoking or vaping, that it's like your lungs like absorb a lot of this. It's not just that like it's going inside your lungs, it's that like it actually absorbs a lot of these toxins, a lot of these heavy metals, these carcinogens, cancer causing chemicals that stay in your lungs. It's not just a matter of it going in and out, but it is actually absorbed and then it gets into your bloodstream. You mentioned the Bernoulli effect related to singing. Glad to provide any sort of excitement when talking about this nerdy shit. What do lungs do? Your lungs' main function is to bring oxygen to your blood and remove carbon dioxide from your body. When you inhale through your nose or mouth, air travels down your pharynx, back of your throat, like back here, passes through your larynx, your voice box, and into your trachea, windpipe. So when people have, what is it called? A tracheotomy, when they are needing to breathe, like where they have that hole that's put in there, that's the trachea, that's where their windpipe is, or where our windpipe is. Then it moves into your left and right bronchial tubes and into smaller and smaller passages, bronchioles. I'm not sure how to say that. The airways end in tiny air sacs called alveoli. These are surrounded by blood vessels. Your alveoli hold the air, and the blood that flows by picks up oxygen. Your blood delivers the oxygen to your tissues to use for energy. At the same time, your blood also drops off carbon dioxide to your lungs, which you breathe out on your next exhale. This process happens 12 to 20 times per minute. Okay, so there's the structure. I did want to get into what helps with lung health. Keep your lungs healthy. Don't smoke or vape. It's never too late to quit. This is not to demonize tobacco use or like nicotine use at all. It can affect your lung health, but one of the things with singers, it does affect your lung capacity as well, so that you aren't able to take as deep of breaths. If you have to work with materials that create dust or fumes, wear a respirator mask and make sure the area is well ventilated. Maintain a weight that's healthy for you. They always say this. That is a very loaded point there, because like not everyone even has the ability to maintain weight or like regulate it. A lot of that has to do with class and our material conditions. So get regular physical activity. This helps your heart and lung muscles stay strong. Drink plenty of fluids, which again, singing is also very much a thing that's like, you have to drink a lot of water. This really helps with being able to sing better. It actually is flushing out not only your lungs, but all of these other aspects that it was talking about, like going back up here, your pharynx, your larynx, especially when it comes to your larynx, your voice box. If you are not hydrated, your vocal cords are very tight. They can't like move back and forth very freely, and that means that you aren't able to sing as clearly. You don't have quite as much control, and it can also cause some damage. So here are some exercises that I wanted to continue with. We saw some of this last week. She has some really great information on just vocal lessons that I highly recommend. So we'll watch this, and then I do have like a little exercise that I wanted to show, and then we'll call it a day.
Exercise that we're going to do is a v on a note and pulse to make sure that we are engaging those muscles that are engaging the diaphragm. So we're going to go.
So she's talking about the diaphragm specifically in singing, but of course this impacts your breath because you can't breathe without your diaphragm engaged. But since the diaphragm is a muscle, you can strengthen it, and you can intentionally be activating it. And also when it comes to lungs, you can also increase your air capacity.
Oh.
She's doing vibrato on the last one.
Now let's do the same thing but on a longer phrase. So this time we're going to go. And as you do this, make sure that you're feeling that expansion on the in-breath and the gradual pull in on the out-breath. Here we go.
I once had a... whoops, I won't stop like that frame. I once had a singing teacher say that he described it as like prepping your diaphragm so that it's actually engaged before you start singing. So it's like a little more mindful even before starting a breathing exercise like this. How we were talking about last week, the diaphragm, like it can also impact like your ability to urinate or to poop. And, he would say before you like actually start singing a phrase, to make sure that you're like engaging your diaphragm when singing, he would say poop flex. So what that meant essentially was like you are loose with your breath to let it in, and then you flex your diaphragm so that it's engaged before you even start singing. These V's, singing on V takes a lot of air. So this is a really great way to increase capacity. There are some singing teachers that have you do trills, so like with your tongue, or even like lip buzzing, like that also requires a lot of air to do.
Awesome. If you're working on a song, try singing the melody on the V and make sure that as you're inhaling, you're getting that 360-degree breath and that your belly is gradually pulling in as the diaphragm moves up when you are singing.
Okay, just to catch that last point that she said, you can also try singing the words to your song and pay focus on getting the 360-degree expansion on the breath and gradual inward motion of your abdomen while you sing. Yeah, so like focusing that like your breath is going out like this, not just up and down where you have these shallow breaths that are coming mostly just in your chest cavity.
Is gradually pulling in as the diaphragm moves up when you are singing. The diaphragm is so important when it comes to breathing, and sometimes there can be areas of the body that are hindering you from taking your most optimal breath, whether that be bad posture or tension in your body. But there are different movements that you can do that'll help to relieve the tension in those areas, as well as improve your singing voice, open up your sound, and sing with more vocal freedom. If you want to know what those movements are, all you have to do is click the link in the pinned comment below and get my free course, Free Your Voice with Movement. I'll see you on the next video. Thanks so much for watching.
Okay. So I think she had a really great explanation there. She did a V. People also do like a Z. That can be helpful. That also can be helpful to like practice a song as you're learning the melody, actually learning what the notes are that you are trying to internalize. That it's practicing your breath capacity, what you need to be doing in order to have enough air, especially as you are singing higher, you're singing louder, singing very low, that requires more air. Where you're wanting to have more vibrato, that requires more air. So, I'm 100% sure there's merit in that. It would move your throat. Yeah, which, I mean, there is also that aspect to singing as well. Okay, so this is like a resistance band that I got. This was for like just doing some physical therapy that I needed to do. Resistance bands are great like for working out and whatnot, but it also can be helpful with singing. So she mentioned earlier of like even putting like a belt around your rib cage. So I'll scoot back like this and taking in a breath, like practicing, and it doesn't even have to be like this, like it can be like a string or a belt where you can actually see it expand. You can actually like look in the mirror and see where it's expanding all around, that hopefully it's not just like coming from up here, but that it is lower, and you can actually see this happening with your ribs specifically, because they're like floating. They aren't just like locked into place. And also getting over the like mental aspect of just trying to like always be like looking thin, like keeping everything locked in. It's like you have to be able to relax fully in order to let as much air into your lungs as possible. So also something that helps with like having more power and breath, since you're here, Photo Piadini, uh, maybe I'll sing it in Italian phrase. My pronunciation's probably shit, so sorry. But um, classical singing in particular takes a lot of breath. That's like the whole point about it. It's not supposed to be like coming from here whatsoever. It's about like having as much ease up here and allowing it to have your breath be basically the whole thing. So, like if I'm singing the beginning of a phrase that's like, so this is me not really engaging. If we like start doing this, like this, and you're focusing on actually engaging your core, like this also like works out your arms, whatever. But like this can also be a helpful exercise if you're trying to get more power and you're trying to learn on like what that even feels like in your body. You can go like, I want to blow out this mic. So breathing in and then engaging. Troppo il nostro favorito convegno. Like, hopefully that could even be heard. That wasn't just blowing out the mic. But like, if you're wanting to practice moving through your breath in a very smooth way as well, like getting more power as you go, like using this as a way to help you like move through it in a smooth way. Like it helps to see the visual. It also helps to engage your diaphragm in that particular way so that you can feel it. I don't know if that's helpful, but there you go. You don't have to have a resistance band to do that. It does help to actually like have something to like be pushing against so that it's not just you pretending that it's like actually engaging your muscles. But there you go. That is the singing lesson for today for Culture Corner. I was going to finish the Scarlet Pimpernel. I think I'm going to actually stream tomorrow a bit in the afternoon. So if you're involved or you're part of the Discord, you can join and get a notification there. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok. I don't post frequently. I'm working on that. But that's also where I give updates on when I'm going to go live. But primarily in the Discord is where I give updates. So that link is in the profile if you are interested. But yeah, we didn't have as long of a Culture Corner today. Maybe I'll extend it into tomorrow. I think I'll do that. Okay. Anyway, thank you for being here. It was lovely seeing you and chatting with you all. I hope you have a good weekend. I will see you tomorrow, but if not, I hope I see you soon. Okay, bye.